Welcome back to the J&B podcast. This is episode 4 with special guest Pete Corrado. He's an author from New York. His writing has appeared in many outlets, including the New York Times, SportsIllustrated.com, Journalism Review, Rolling Stone, and more. His first book, From Hang Time to Prime Time, recently was released, and it's a well-researched book about the upbringing of the NBA. Thanks for joining us.
No, my pleasure. It's correct me if I'm mistaken, guys, but am I the first non-West Virginian on this podcast?
You are.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So I guess I beat Kevin Pittsnoggle. All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm on the board.
Well,
No, I'm happy to be. No, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me. It's I don't think I've talked to a few podcasts and radio shows, but I don't think anyone from I don't think anybody from West Virginia. So this is I'm
Really?
thrilled to do this.
That's awesome. Yeah. So and I'm sure you get asked this 100 times, but what made you want to write the book?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to write this book. It's funny. I had this book in my head for about 7 years.
Wow.
And it came about for two reasons. First is that I wrote a piece for Grantland on Marvin Gaye's national anthem at the 1983 NBA All-Star Game, which is in the book. And after I wrote that story, which I enjoyed immensely, like I interviewed 25 people and really did a lot of research and got into the nitty-gritty. There were two things that came to mind. The first thing was there was so much that I left out of the story that I wanted to put in. Other avenues that I wanted to explore that I couldn't because I only had, I think, 2,500 words. So there wasn't a lot of, I ran out of room pretty quickly. And the second thing was that anthem really kind of marked a turning point for the NBA, and it, in my opinion, and it marked it marked the beginning. It was the border between the old NBA, which is short shorts and boring telecasts on CBS, and a lot of trying to kowtow to the crowd that liked college football and baseball and the NFL, which is a very stodgy older crowd, and the new NBA, which was very much about being new and different and being about entertainment and embracing a black audience and the players that were black. It wasn't about just trying to make it into something that it wasn't. So that really stuck with me. And as I read, I'm like you guys, I'm sure you read a lot of basketball books and a lot of sports books in general. I never really read anything about how the NBA got to be the NBA,
Right.
where you have, where it's this global game and, the TV show, the telecasts are everywhere and you can't avoid it. So I really wanted to write. After writing that Grantland piece and then, a lifetime, and you can see behind me here, a sample of those books, reading all these books, I thought, you know what, I think I want to try and write this on my own. I think I want to see if I can make a book out of it. And 7 years later, here I am talking to you guys. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I want to get into more specific questions about the book, but I mean, this goes from beginning to where it is today. So, what would you say is the biggest decade in the history of the sport?
Ooh, the biggest decade. I'm trying to think. I don't want to give you the salesman type answer and tell you that my decade was the one that mattered. I want to be honest with you, but I'm thinking, that's a good question. I don't think no one's asked me that question. I would say the 80s. So that is covered in my book, but I have a reason for it. I'm not just saying that because I want to sell more copies of this bad boy. But if you look at the 80s, there are a few things happen. Well, more than a few things happen. Michael Jordan comes in 1984. So does David Stern, the former commissioner of the NBA. So you have those two titans of the game that come in. Michael Jordan, of course, revolutionizes the game in terms of how it's played, in terms of fashion with basketball sneakers or shoes, pardon me.
Absolutely.
And so you have that component. And David Stern comes in and just completely revolutionized how the game is portrayed.
Right.
He's all about marketing. He's all about the players and marketing the players and making sure that the players shine. In 1979 into 1980, that's Magic Johnson and Larry Bird's first year as professionals. So that's a huge part of the narrative of the NBA. That's sort of the first wave of popularity of the NBA, where you have a rivalry that the league and that CBS can market and play to the hilt. So I would say for those reasons, plus I should say you have the rise of video cassettes. NBA Entertainment comes in and they come out with Come Fly With Me, all these Michael Jordan tapes that, I and a whole scat of kids grew up with. So those reasons I think are why the 80s to me are the most important decade in NBA history. And and again, that feeds into everything that you see with the 90s and today. The first real wave of international players come around in 1989. The NBA signs its TV contract with NBC in 1989. So yeah, I mean, if we're gonna talk about the decade that matters the most, to me, it's the 80s. I think the 80s sets up everything that you see today.
So speaking more into the international side of it, when do you think basketball really became global?
I would say the Dream Team in '92. I think that's when you really got to see basketball as a worldwide game. And it's funny, I talked to people who were around the Dream Team at that time, and they were telling me that it was like the Beatles. Like it was just the players were mobbed wherever they went. It was crazy. And that I mean, and if you guys are probably too young to remember this, but I was 14 or 15 when the Dream Team took over. I mean, that was the discussion as a sports fan. If you were a teenage sports fan, like that was the cafeteria discussion for like ever. Like that's all my friends would talk about was the Dream Team. Like it was a big thing. So let's see. So what I was going to say, yes. So the one thing that really stuck out to me in watching those games, which were slaughters. Like the Dream Team just beat everybody, like just annihilated them. It was crazy. And the score, I mean, it wasn't if a team lost by 30 points, that was a victory. Like if Spain or Lithuania beat the U.S. but lost to the U.S., excuse me, like 25 points, that was a victory.
It might well point.
Yeah, but the thing that stuck out to me was the number of players that were just in awe. I'm sorry, the players on the other teams who were in awe of Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan and Larry Bird. Like they were taking photos of them, after the game, before the game. I think there's an anecdote, and I think it might be in Jack McCallum's book on the Dream Team, where one of the players, I don't know if you remember who it was, maybe it was Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan, was talking about how his opponent, where one of those guys was talking about how his opponent was posting him up, and his opponent was saying like, "Take a photo of me now. Take a photo of me now. I'm posting up Magic."
No way.
Yeah. So that just goes to like just how in awe the rest of the world was of the Dream Team, and just how big basketball gotten globally. And the clues were there to begin with, but I think '92 is really when you saw it explode. And yeah, I mean, and for me as a 14, 15-year-old, seeing that was like, wow, like this is really a global game. And it didn't, and I was not a bright 15-year-old, so like it wasn't, like any great revelation.
Now, I did
up,
see. I haven't. Go ahead, Brady.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. Now I saw in the book you're able to land some big time interviews. Which was so cool to see. But I wanted to go into more in depth about influence and by individual players. And you have Dr. J as an interview. So in terms of influence, and you can go into how your interview was with him. What did he do for the game, especially in his time frame?
No, I'm glad you mentioned Dr. J because I think Julius Erving is probably one of the most overlooked figures in basketball history.
Right.
Um, for a couple of reasons. First is that he was really the first NBA's well, he was the NBA's first real television superstar. Before Michael Jordan, before LeBron James, before Kobe Bryant, for all those guys,
Yeah.
Dr. J was the guy. And I remember being, 5 or 6 years old, 7 years old. I wasn't a big basketball fan,
Right.
but I knew who Dr. J was. I knew who Julius Erving was. And it goes to show, and that just shows you how well, how big he was. I mean, he was somebody who, if you look at the NBA before 1976, which is when Dr. J comes in as part of the ABA merger. The NBA doesn't really have a a superstar who is marketable, but whose game is also easily identified as being great. I'll give you an example. Like if the big star at that time was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who is a wonderful player. He's the NBA's all-time leading scorer. He's a Hall of Famer. He is probably one of the top 5 players in NBA history.
Yeah.
But he was somebody who's not terribly popular because here's somebody who's 7'3", who is who has a sky hook. Now, if you're 7 years old and you're watching that, it's hard to imagine hitting the sky hook. It's hard to imagine being that tall
Right.
and releasing a ball like that high. You can't.
Right.
You can't. That's hard to process. And
Relate to.
exactly. And his game also wasn't terribly aesthetically pleasing. Like if you look at the players now, like LeBron and Kobe, to give 2 examples because I'm staring right at them. Like if you showed like your grandfather or your next door neighbor or your aunt or someone who doesn't know basketball, like if you showed them clips of LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, they would be like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Look at him do that stuff! Wow, it's crazy."
Right.
The NBA didn't have
he's a
anyone like
superhero.
that. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah, exactly. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was very methodical. He had that kind of great, and this is no disrespect to Kareem, but he had a great like old man game where like you pound the guy in the paint, like you get your position and you let that hook go. And the hook was deadly effective, but it was not something that would make, the teenagers scream up and down and want more. So there's that aspect. Also, Kareem was not terribly relatable. He wasn't great with the press. He was moody.
Right.
He also was someone who had been in the public eye for a long time. Remember, this is someone who was a national celebrity when he was in his teens with Power Memorial and then with UCLA, and he was always somebody who was under the microscope. So he was prickly, I think, for that reason. And you added the fact that he converts to Islam, or pardon me, he becomes a Muslim in the 1970s, and that is a religion that is really unfamiliar. I mean, if you think it's unfamiliar now, like go back 40 years, like it's even worse. So you have a lot of people that don't really. You have someone who is very icy to begin with, who then takes on a religion or converts religion that a lot of people just want nothing to do with.
Yeah.
So you have those 2 factors come in, and with Julius Erving, it's the complete and utter opposite. Right. His game is all about dunking and fun and flash. He gives the NBA new life because he is at the forefront of the open floor game where everyone's high flying and dunking the ball and shooting 3-pointers. ABA, of course. So he's headlining. He's a headliner with guys like David Thompson, George Gervin, Bobby Jones, Marvin Barnes, on and on and on. But the other thing about Julius Erving was he not only did he have this identifiably great game, this game that, again, like the alien test, as Bob Ryan calls it, where if you brought an alien down to Earth and sat that alien and you had that alien watch a basketball game, and the alien goes, "Wow, that guy is great! Wow, look at that!" That's Julius Erving. He passes the alien test.
Right.
So you have Julius in that regard, but then you have somebody who is just super duper marketable. Julius Erving, then as is now, is very handsome. He is regal in bearing. He never says the wrong thing. He is well spoken, poised, and he had time for every interview. Like if you're in a locker room,
That's
Julius
awesome.
Erving would answer your question. He would just, and he would do it with a smile, and he would do whatever media request, whatever ad spot you wanted him to do. Julius was there, and the NBA relied on him to do that. And it was a perfect meeting of marketability and playerability. To answer your question about Julius now, he's still very much the same way, I think. When I spoke to him, this is about 2 years ago, there's very much that facade that he puts up, I think, where you are not gonna probe into who Julius Erving is in a 45-minute interview. That's not gonna happen. But but I think if you're well prepared and you know what you're talking about, you can get into him a little bit deeper. But I think Julius Erving is still very much about being Julius Erving. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're trying to portray him as a person, that's a little harder to do. He was a highlight to interview for sure, because it's, again, bottom line, it's Dr. J. You're interviewing basketball history. Like so that's crazy. I mean, the basketball fan in me, like, again, I try to be impartial and be a journalist, but talking to Dr. J is pretty cool. Like that's a good, like, dinner party conversation.
Oh, you've made it. Made it. Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I mean, it's like if one of you guys spoke to Giannis or LeBron James, like,
no doubt,
that's a highlight. Like call mom and tell her that tell her that you interviewed LeBron that day, or dad. That's a big deal.
For sure.
Okay. So back to the people we interviewed. I saw Phil Jackson in there, and of course Dr. Dre. Who was your favorite person to interview?
Who's my favorite interview?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, if we're gonna see, this is a tricky question, because everyone always wants to hear, like, Julius Erving or George Gervin or, like, the stars, and that's understandable. And by the way, George Gervin was great. George Gervin called me after he had mowed his lawn, and we talked for like 40 minutes, and he was great. Dan Issel was really good. But the folks that were terrific were the people that are you've never heard of. Like, I think the best interview I did, or my most favorite interview, most favorite interview, oh boy, probably with a guy named John Gaffney, who was with CBS Fox Home Video. And he was somebody who just had the best stories, and he was such an enthusiastic storyteller that it was just a joy to talk to him. And John is just one of, like, 30 people I can mention. I think I've answered this question a few times, and I've always come up with a different answer, because so many people were great. So many people were so evocative and generous with their answers. Like John gave me, like, this great anecdote, and I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't read the book, but a great anecdote where he overheard David Stern, like, completely, like, lash out at James Worthy for soliciting a prostitute and getting arrested for it. So it's those people, like the people that weren't stars necessarily, who had these stories and wanted to share them and were grateful to share them, that they were inevitably the best people. Like Don Sterling, who was with the Utah Jazz. I'm not sure if he's still with them anymore. He was great. Like he talked about working for David Stern and like what it was like to work with the NBA in the beginning. The thing is, and here's another tip for the youngins out there. If you're interviewing people for a story, if you're interviewing, like, stars, those are great. You want to get, like, the big names, but the thing is that those people, like the Phil Jacksons, the George Gervins, and especially the younger stars now, they're so media trained and they're
Yeah.
so used to being talked to by reporters that they go into like reporter mode a lot of the times. So if you can so there's a real benefit, at least I think there is, of talking to people who were maybe not like the lead star, but were supporting players, because they haven't been interviewed 1,000 times, and they might also be more giving in terms of their time and in terms of in terms of what they share. And I got very lucky. There were people I spoke to multiple times for this book who were just extremely generous with their time and who were helpful in more ways than one. So yeah, it was a real pleasure. I mean, I could give you 50 names of people who were just like awesome interviews. Some of them were stars, some of them not. But and that was one of the real pleasures of this book, was just talking to so many great people. Let's see, if we're talking about the book proper, we're looking at, I started this, took 16 months, 11 months of reporting and research, and then 5 months of writing. That was the first draft. If we're talking about the long version, let's see. So the idea popped in my head in February 2013, and so yeah, this is 2021 now. So almost 8 years from like from the idea like germinating to like getting the book out. Yeah, and it was worth it. It was worth every month. It was the time. Like some people might hear 8 years and think, oh God, like 8 years, like nah. It wasn't. It didn't feel like that long, because during that time, I was working on pieces, and you mentioned some of these places like Rolling Stone, Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
Those pieces kind of built up my Rolodex, my source list, and they also got me writing about the NBA and about the topics I wanted to cover in the book. So it was all time well spent. And any time that you're learning and talking to interesting people and getting better as in whatever profession you're in this case, writing and reporting, it was all time well spent. So I have no regrets about the time that it took.
So what? So what inspired you to start writing pieces?
Oh man.
And when? And
like just like sports and pop culture stuff, or just writing in general?
just writing in general. Like, what inspired you to do that?
Oh man. I grew up in a house of. I grew up in a house. Well, like most people, I grew up in a house, but the house was always had books. Like my mom was an editor at a publishing house. My dad is and was an inveterate reader, just read all the time. So it was very hard to grow up in a house and not read and not have books around. And my parents stoked that love, and from reading came a love of writing. And I think that came about because I remember writing a piece, not writing a piece. I was 13 years old. There were no pieces back then. I was writing a paper for a 7th grade English class about, I think it was about a baseball game. Like I remember, it's coming back to me. I remember writing a book. I'm not book. Sorry, this is how long it's been. I remember writing this paper about a baseball game, and about like, I'm a New York Mets fan, so about the Mets winning. And I remember having so much fun with that. And then my mom later that year, this is 1991, so I'm 13. I'm 13 going on 14. My mom says, "Hey, the local community college is like having like a writing course. If you're interested in that, like it's for kids and for teens, and you've shown some interest in that. Would you want to sign up for it?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun." And it was great. It was fun to write. It was fun to write short stories and poems and things that I never really got a chance to do outside of the beyond the classroom. And then at this time too, I started getting into Roger Ebert, the film critic, who passed away in 2013, and his stuff was just blew me away. So I began writing film reviews just on the side. Like I can probably go there in my bookcase here. I can probably show you like reviews I wrote when I was 14 or 15. Just like I kept a little black notebook of reviews. So that's really what got me started. And then throughout high school, you have teachers and teachers and friends who, encouraged me to write. And my parents never once told me, "Oh yeah, you should go to law school," or maybe you should try something else. They were always super supportive. And knock on wood, that continued through college. Like throughout middle school, high school, college, there were always people who were encouraging or who taught me something I didn't know or who recommended something like a book I should read. And that all set me up for here. It really just, again, I mean, this started very, very early. I mean, this is I'm 43 now, so I mean, you're looking at a nearly 40-year process of going from having a book placed in your hand and having your mom and dad read to you to writing one of these behemoths. So it's like it's a long time coming. Absolutely. And I think in another 10 to 15 years we'll be saying these are the best athletes we've ever seen.
Right.
Because again, it's just the biggest difference is just the training and also what's available. It's so funny if you read Eric Malinowski's book Beta Ball about the Warriors. He really goes into what the Warriors and other teams do now to keep players at peak physical condition. It's they have sleep therapists, dietitians, everything. I mean, everything is the not to sound like a cold-hearted corporate drone here, but these players are now paid millions of dollars, and like if you and these franchises are worth billions of dollars. The players are investments, and I think everyone knows that. So it's in the players' best interests to make sure they're at peak physical condition. And a good example of that is LeBron James. I think someone told me that LeBron, spends $1 million out of his own pocket just to make sure that he's running like he's at his best. And that's everything from from dietitians, nutritionists, personal trainers. What was I going to say? Like hyperbolic chambers to sleep in. It's crazy. And and these kids also, if you look at AAU and just youth basketball now, like the pipeline now starts really early. Like if you are considered skilled at a sport, like you are just put in that sport and you go all the way. Like back in the day, you could play different sports. Like you could play baseball and basketball and soccer and like kind of get a taste of everything. But right now, like if you're good at basketball, like if you're 8 years old, 9 years old, like that's what you do. And you are just shot through that pipeline. And if you're good enough, like you become an NBA player and you get the fruits of that labor. But it's crazy. I mean, I'm curious as to what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of technology physical training, diet, like what's going to happen to keep players even playing even longer. I mean, LeBron, how long is he going to play for? I mean, he's 36 and he's playing like he's a 25-year-old. So it's insane. It's insane. So I'll ask you guys this. Do you think we're going to see a top 10 player in their early to mid 40s? Do you think LeBron James is going to be like when he's 44, let's say, putting up like, I don't know, let's say 28 and 8 a night?
If no injuries happen, I could see that if he plays that long.
No, I mean the thing is he's still playing the same way. If you look at LeBron James in 2006, 2007, and LeBron James now, I mean, he might be more of a distributor, but like he is not like he hasn't lost a step, or maybe he lost a half a step. But whenever I watch him whenever I watch him as a fan, again, I'm not an analyst or a sports or like a full-time sports writer, but as a fan, I'm always amazed at how he plays. Because again, like, I mean, I'm at the age now where like I'm noticing things aren't what they used to be. Like I don't pop up as quickly if I get hurt or if something happens. So like and he's in his mid 30s and he's playing a sport that is physically taxing and is also very, very physical. Like his game is a physical game. So it's amazing to me that he is still performing at this level. Like it is crazy, because if you look at the players that perform well into their late 30s, they're usually like post players. Yeah, exactly. So Carmelo, like Kareem, those guys. It's not guys that are leading the break. Like it's all, yeah, crazy, right? Like, and what was that the most assists he had in the season? I think. What did he ever? Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's I mean that is crazy, and I think, and again, I think it's you can't discount genetics too, because I think whenever I see LeBron, I honestly see Serena Williams, because I think they're just genetic marvels. I don't know. I think, I want to phrase this properly. I think LeBron is the exception, but it wouldn't surprise me if in 10 to 15 years we start seeing this become more of a trend. I don't think the same way that Serena Williams is 37, and she's still bouncing around the court like she's 18. I don't know how. I think nutrition and all of those, all of the training and the handlers and all those people that you have in your corner who make you great, I think that only goes so far. I think at some point, like, Mother Nature comes in, or I don't know, whatever the Mother Nature version of genetics is, comes in and just like kind of touches you and says, okay, you know what, you're special. Like it's, and I think with LeBron and Serena, I think they're just special in terms of just what they've been able to do for as long as they've done it. It's incredible. Okay, go ahead. Right. No, and go, you're absolutely right. And look, go back even further. Look at Oscar Robertson. I mean, he was. I mean, so I mean, I don't know if you put Oscar Robertson in today's NBA and give him the training and like give him hundreds of millions of dollars, so he's not like working like over the summer, like 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 I don't know. I mean, I mean, is he the greatest of all time? I'm gonna say no, and it's not because I'm not doing a Skip Bayless thing and just gonna say no and then just rant and rave and throw stuff. I think, it is. I think, well, first of all, it's the championships. LeBron has. I can't. I find it very hard to give LeBron the greatest of all time with only 4 championships. When you have Jordan with 6, you have Magic with 5, you have Kareem with 6, you have Bill Russell with 11. Excuse me. No. So,
No.
and consider this too. Like, I really, and this is, I'm kind of borrowing a Keith Olbermann's logic here. When you look at when Russell, Robertson, Bob Pettit, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, when those guys played, they were only playing like 8 or 9 teams or 10 teams, so they were playing the best of the best. Like every night, you were getting the best that the world had to offer in basketball. Now you have 30 teams, 32. I've lost track. There might have been a team created as this conversation started. So it's very hard for me. So because of that sample size, it's very hard for me to say LeBron is the greatest. Is he my top 10? Oh, absolutely. But I can't put him higher than Jordan. I can't put him higher than Kareem. I can't put him higher than Bill Russell. I mean, with Bill Russell, what's amazing about Bill Russell is that he changed the game by not being an offensive-minded player. He wasn't a scorer. His defense, his leadership, and just were invaluable assets. Keep in mind too that Bill Russell was also playing at a time when being a black man in Boston was a real problem, and he put up with stuff that I think would have driven lesser men to strangle somebody. But Bill Russell, not only put up these gaudy numbers as a defensive anchor, not a scorer, but he also did that at a time when the city that he played in didn't want him there. I mean, there's a story, I'm sure you guys have heard it, where people vandals broke into his home in the Boston suburbs and shat in his bed. Like they vandalized, and they just, can you imagine that? Like, and then you have to play for those people later that night. So to me, Russell is probably 1 or 2, because he came of age in an NBA where not only were the amenities not there, but just like he just was disliked for the color of his skin, like which at that time was like socially acceptable. Like you could hate somebody because they were black or they were Asian or whatever. So I mean, but is LeBron in my top 10? Oh, absolutely. And probably my top 5, but not number 1. And not because I don't love LeBron. I love LeBron. But historically, when you look at the spectrum, I just can't pull the trigger. So clearly, so Jonathan, you have him 1. Brady, where is he? Where is LeBron for you?
He's at my 1 too.
Okay, and that's totally fine, because again, like if I'm 43, you guys are probably like, early 20s, teens at this point. So like you grew up with him, like he's your guy.
He's like,
so like you're always gonna exactly. So you're always gonna have an affinity for the guy that you grew, for the guy who you, for the man or woman who you grew up with, who made you fall in love with the sport. The same way that, like, I remember there's a guy I played ball with who was like in his 50s, early 60s, and he would ramble on and on about Wilt Chamberlain being the best of all time. Not my choice, but like I can understand that, because like at that time, like Wilt was it. So I mean, there's definitely the sentimental value there. But I mean, again, look, I mean, Jordan isn't my number 1 because I'm biased here. I was a Knicks fan in the 90s. So Jordan was my nemesis for like 5 years, and I just, I couldn't, again, I respect Jordan's game. I love watching the highlights now that there's some distance. But when you're 16, 17 and he's pounding the Knicks every spring, that is some hard gravel to swallow. So it was just like every year it's like, oh, here we go again. Like every spring, just misery. So yeah.
So the Knicks are still your team right now, I'm assuming?
No, they're not.
No?
When James Dolan didn't re-sign Jeremy Lin, I was done. I was done. That was it for me. So then my wife and I were living in suburban Philadelphia, like 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. So I became a Sixers fan right when the process was starting. Like this is before Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons came along. So like it's really nitty gritty. It's like, I don't know who. It's like Nerlens Noel and Michael Carter Williams, like really early on in the process. And I kind of fell in love with that team because I love the way they were coached. I thought Brett Brown was a great coach for that team. And I also thought the broadcast team for the cable coverage was great. So I kind of like, it was a nice mix for me. So I guess I'm a Sixers fan, I guess, but like, I don't know. I just love watching good basketball. Like to me, it doesn't matter who's playing. Like if there are 2 great teams playing or 2 great players, like there's something I can enjoy out of that. Plus, I found that as I've gotten older, like being a hardcore fan of a team eats up a lot of energy. And like, I don't
Yeah.
know, I got a kid, I got a mortgage, I have a wife who I want to make sure is, tended to emotionally. So I can't be pounding my head against the wall when Joel Embiid is taking another 25 footer. I found I'm much happier as kind of as sort of an NBA agnostic, where like I'll watch the games and I love watching Steph Curry play. I think he's a joy to watch. But I don't know. I can't really get into a team because it is so, it takes a lot out of you. I mean, to be a fan, like that's a big commitment, and I don't know. So I'm at the point now where it's like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm gonna just watch the games and just enjoy the games and just savor every Steph Curry three from deep, every Giannis Euro step. I'm gonna savor that and just enjoy the games as they unfold.
So, who are your top 3 players you like to watch right now?
Oh man, it's a good question. See, I'm going to preface this by saying I have a 4-year-old daughter, so typically I'm watching. I know more about Peppa Pig and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. So if you want my insights on those shows, I'm happy to. But I'm happy to provide them. But I'll tell you what, as I said before, I love watching Steph Curry play because I think it's just insane what he does from long range. Like what I love about Steph Curry is that he does stuff that he's doing moves that that until recently were only done like mid range. Like you weren't crossing up somebody like you weren't crossing somebody up from 3-point from like 25 feet and then like swishing a three. Like that wasn't happening. So I love watching Steph play. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Again, I think LeBron to me is somebody who is, I'm going to put LeBron up there because I don't know how many years we have left, and I think it's always good to savor someone who's good because you don't know when they're going to leave.
Yeah.
I grew up, as a kid of the '90s, I always thought Michael Jordan was going to be around. I always thought Patrick Ewing was going to be around. Those guys, they get old and time catches up, and you're left wondering, you're left thinking, I should have appreciated that person more. Let's see, third player. Let me think. That's the thing. That's the thing that's so great about the NBA now is that there's so many awesome players. Like it's name a team and there's someone who's great. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to go through the league here. Who do I like? Let me think. Let me go Midwest. Let me go South. Let me go East. Let me think. I'm trying to think of players that I like that are out of the realm here. Let's see. Scott Steph. You know what? I'm going to go with Joel Embiid because I just think, again, like when I was growing up, like big men did not take 3-pointers. They weren't like doing fancy dribbling stuff. And again, with Joel Embiid, it's like watching, I don't know, like it's like watching an elephant tap dance or or like it's like this shouldn't be happening, but here it is. Okay, I'm going to enjoy it. So what about you? What about you two? Who are your top 3? If you're watching, if you're like who are you making time for? Okay. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he's great. Yeah. Yeah, Luka is what I love about Luka is that he's so big, but he doesn't really play like a big man. He's like a guard, which is crazy.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good. Those are good. Those are all good choices.
I got 2 of those 3 on mine. I got LeBron, Luka, and Dame Lillard. Those are my 3.
Yeah. No. Those, yeah. And again, like you could probably. I mean, to come up with a top 10 list is impossible. I think because the NBA is
Right.
that deep, and the international players are so good now. Like they're just so good, and they're so. I mean, again, like the basketball is caught up with the rest of the world. So, like if you look at like the best players now, I think I'm trying to think. Did we all mention an international player? I think we did.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure. 10 years ago, yeah, 10 years ago, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we're saying that. I'm not sure I'm not sure that's part of the discussion. It's funny you mentioned Ball. Like he reminds me of a lot Jason Kidd because like he wasn't like offensive minded, but like he did a lot of stuff that was again didn't show up in the box score.
Right.
Yeah, did he? I'm trying to. Was that? I get him and his brother confused all the time because I'm terrible. But like, what did he? I think was it. Did he unleash that full court bounce pass like against Orlando a few weeks ago? I'm trying to remember who that was. It
Yeah.
was crazy.
Yeah,
Like that was like okay, like yeah, and it hit the guy in stride too. Like bonkers. Yeah, it's yeah. He's that family that family has some good players. Yeah, it's
Right.
yeah. It's but again, it's all yeah. I'm never gonna I'm never gonna fault anyone for choosing like who their favorite player is. It's because it's all subjective.
Yeah. All right. Well, one of us has to go here, so we're gonna wrap up.
Okay. Okay.
We really appreciate you coming on though, and thank you for everything. And
Oh, my pleasure, guys.
everyone,
Thank you.
go get this book.
Yeah, happy
Yeah,
to, and I'll grab my own copy since we're plugging away here. All right, here we go. I have to stop sitting down. Yeah, the book is from Hang Time to Prime Time. You can get it from pretty much any online or brick and mortar. There we go. Bookseller. So it's on. You go to bookshop.org, IndieBound, which are independent booksellers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you want an autographed copy, there are 2 ways to do that. First, if you buy the book and you send me proof of that you bought the book, I will send you a signed book plate free of charge. I'll mail it anywhere in the country. You can also get an autographed copy, inscribed, obviously, through Odyssey Bookstore in Ithaca, New York. So if you go to odysseybookstore.com and you call or email the staff there, I pop in about once a week and sign books, and I think it's only an extra $5 to get it shipped anywhere in the country. So so I think it's a great deal, and it's you can also get the book on Kindle, audiobook, local library. I think that covers it. I don't know if supermarkets are selling it.
Yeah, we'll link all those.
But yeah,
places
thanks for having me on.
underneath the video.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, it's no, and I'm again, I'm happy to sign a copy, or it's my pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate
Guys,
it.
my pleasure. This is a lot of fun. No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and this was great. I'm happy to be the first, again, the first non-West Virginian on the podcast. So
we never even thought of that.
You know what? It's that's fine. I mean, it's you got to start somewhere. It's I'm thrilled it was me. Thank you for this. This is great.